In section 3.5, we're going to talk about standard form. Standard form is the third formula you must memorize. So under the solve it at the top of page 203, I want you to write this. AX plus BY equals C. That is standard form. Standard form is when you have a coefficient of x, a coefficient of y, and it's x and then your y term, and then equals your c, which is your constant. So, for example, this would be an equation in standard form: 3x plus 2y equals 6. That is in standard form. So now I want you to look at the gray box in the middle of page 203. In this lesson, you will learn to use intercepts to graph a line. Recall that a y-intercept is the y-coordinate of a point where the graph crosses the y-axis. You've already done that. The y-intercept is where the y-coordinate crosses the y-axis. The x-intercept, which you have not used, this is why it's bolded, it's a vocab word. The x-intercept is where the graph crosses the x-axis. So the y-coordinate crosses the y-axis, the x-coordinate crosses the x-axis. Here is your essential understanding. One form of a linear equation, called standard form, allows you to find intercepts quickly. You can use the intercepts to draw the graph. So this is the third tool to use to graph things. So what are the three ways you've learned to graph something? You've done t-tables. A t-table is when you find any value of x and plug it in and solve for y. The second way is slope and intercept. Slope and intercept is when you find the slope and the y-intercept and use that to graph. 3 is standard form. And standard form is when you use intercepts, most likely. So the third way to graph are using intercepts. So you have yet another thing that you can use to graph. So I want you to just watch this graph. You do not actually need to draw this or write this down. I just want you to watch and pay attention. Here's a graph. I have graphed a blue line. Where does this graph cross the y-axis? It crosses at 2. Therefore, your y-intercept is y equals 2. Here, what is your x-intercept? Your x-intercept is where the graph crosses the x-axis. So x equals -1. So we have 2 and -1 as our intercepts. And then you connect the lines, or connect the dots, to draw a line through them to draw your equation. So that's precisely what we're going to do. You are going to find the intercepts and then draw a line through those points. At the bottom of page 203, we're going to learn the first thing that you need to do, and that is to graph using x and y intercepts. So we're going to first just find the x and y intercepts. Alright, 5x minus 6y equals 60. We want to find the intercepts. Now I'm going to quickly draw a graph again. You do not need to draw this. This has nothing to do with the problem. Here is my x and y axis. I'm going to draw a line that does this, and let's say this goes through 3 and this goes through 4. So the y-intercept would be 3, the x-intercept is 4, but let's actually write the point down. The x-intercept, notice what happens. On the x-intercept, what's the y value? 0. when the y-intercept is 3, the point's 0, 3. So what's the x value? 0. So here is a little hint. To find the intercept, you plug in 0 for the coordinate of the axis you're not using. So for example, to find the x-intercept, you're going to plug 0 in for y. I'm going to say that again. To find the x-intercept, you plug in 0 for y. To find the y-intercept, you plug in 0 for x. So you plug in 0 for a letter, and that would give you the intercept of the other letter. So here's how easy it becomes. We have to find the x-intercept and the y-intercept. To find the x-intercept, we're going to plug in 0 for y. So you get this, 5x minus 6 times 0 equals 60. This just cancels. 0 times anything is 0. So you get 5x equals 60. Divide by 5. You get x equals 12. Therefore, your x-intercept is 12. To find your y-intercept, we're going to plug in 0 for x. So 5 times 0 cancels. You are left with negative 6y equals 60. Divide by negative 6, you get your y-intercept as negative 10. So our y-intercept is negative 10. And those are our two intercepts. So in B, we're going to do the exact same thing. To find the x-intercept, we're going to plug in 0 for y. Now, I'm going to skip a step. Do you really need to plug in 0 here? 8 times 0. Do you actually need to show me 8 times 0? No. This term right here just cancels. Gone. 8y is going to disappear. So you're going to get 3x equals 12. So your x-intercept would be 4. Now notice that this is in standard form. These have both been in standard form. ax plus by equals c. So that's why this is so easy. So the next part is now to find the y-intercept. We plug in 0 for x. What's 3 times 0? It's 0, so the 3x disappears. So we have 8y equals 12. Divide by 8, you get 12/8, which if you simplify by 4, divide the top and bottom by 4, you are going to get 3/2 or 1.5 or 1.5. So your intercepts would be x-intercept is 4, the y-intercept is 1.5 or 3/2. Alright, to double check that you know how to do this, let's do number 1 on the top of page 204. 7x minus y equals 21. Talk to the screen. Tell me what you're going to do to find the x-intercept. To find the x-intercept, what are you going to plug in for y? Okay, so what would my equation be if the y disappears? 7x equals 21. So what's your x-intercept? 3. Good. Now to find the y-intercept, what do you plug in for x? So what's going to happen to this term right here? It's going to disappear. So my equation is going to be negative y equals 21. Divide both sides by negative 1. What's your y-intercept? The y-intercept is negative 21. So we have an x-intercept of 3 and a y-intercept of negative 21. The second thing you're going to learn is how to graph using intercepts. So we just found the intercepts, now you're going to graph using them. So problem 2, graph using intercepts. And you're going to hopefully find this incredibly easy. So let's look at the got it. The got it is 2x plus 5y equals 20. I'm going to go through this fairly quickly because you have graphs already in your book. To find the x-intercept, plug in 0 for y. So this cancels. Your equation is going to be 2x equals 20. What's your x-intercept? Your x-intercept is 10. Your y-intercept. So my y-intercept, what do I plug in for x? 0. So this just is gone. I mean, really what you're doing is pretending that's just gone. So you're left with 5y equals 20. Divide by 5, y equals 4. Your y-intercept is 4. So here's all you do now. This is it. You're going to make a graph. And once again, you can count by 2s or 5s, however you like. Oops, I did not mean to write a 5. It's not letting me erase it, so I'm just going to make this a y. That's a really bad y. And let's just make it red. Alright, that's a y. So, what's my x-intercept? My x-intercept is 10. So that's where it crosses the x-axis. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So I put a dot here because that's where it crosses. Where does it cross the y-axis? It crosses the y-axis at 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Put a dot. And then you draw a line through the points. And that's it. That's how you graph using the x and y intercept. Numbers 3 and 4. If you solve these, plug in 0 for x. If you plug in 0 for x, that's going to give you negative y equals negative 8. Y equals 8. So your y-intercept is 8. To find x, you plug in 0 for y. X equals negative 8. You're done. So you have 8 and negative 8. So your x-axis, it crosses at what? There's your x-intercept, so it crosses at negative 8. So I'm just going to count by 2s. Negative 2, negative 4, negative 6, negative 8. There's where it crosses. My y-intercept, where it crosses the y-axis, is at 2. Is at 8, so I'm going to count by 2s. 2, 4, 6, 8. I draw a dot. I draw a line through those dots. And that is your line graphed using intercepts. Number 4, if you understand it by now, you can fast forward this. Otherwise, I'm just going to tell you, if you solve the equations, you're going to get 6x equals 18. The x-intercept is 3. Let me redraw that. The y-intercept is going to be negative 2 equals 18. Y equals negative 9. If you graph this, x and y, your x-intercept graphs at 3. It crosses the y-axis at negative 9. I'm going to count by 3s. I connect them. And there is your line graphed using intercepts. Now turn your page to 205 and look at the gray box at the top. I want you to read all of it, but I want you to pay special attention to the last sentence. The graph of y equals a number, which in this case is b. So y equals any number. If it is y equals a number, notice there is no x. If y equals a number, it's a horizontal line. If the graph is x equals a number, it's a vertical line. You need to 100% understand that, know it, remember it, memorize it. Y equals just a number is a horizontal line, which means the slope is 0. The graph of an x equals with no y, that's a vertical line, meaning your slope is undefined. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do problem 3, A, B, C, D, 5, and 6, all on one graph. All on one big graph. So you can do that if you want, or you can do them all separately on all 6 graphs. but you're going to see how easy this is. This requires absolutely no work. All right, so in A says that x equals 4. Here's all you do it. Look back at the gray section. It says at the top, and by the way, you will notice all 6 of these problems have just one letter. If you just have one letter, the line is either going to be horizontal or vertical. If it's y equals, it's horizontal. If it's x equals, like A is, it's going to be vertical. So here's how you do it. X equals 4. Here's the x-axis. That means on the x-axis you put a dot at 4. That's it. Your line is vertical right through the x-axis. X equals 4. B, x equals -1. Put a dot on the x-axis at -1. Now you don't have to put the dot, but it just kind of gives you a guidance of where to draw your line. X equals -1 means the line goes through the x-axis at -1. C, y equals 0. Y equals 0. Now what does it say? It says y equals is a horizontal line. So here's y, the y-axis. Y equals 0. Your line's going to go horizontally through 0 on the y-axis. D, y equals 1. It's going to go through 1 on the y-axis because y equals 1. Y is always going to be 1. And lastly, number 6, x equals 7. X equals 7. Here's x, here's 7. A vertical line through 7 on the x-axis. In problem 4 on page 206, you are now going to be transforming things into standard form. Once again, please remember standard form is ax plus by equals c. That means I have to get rid of all fractions, and I have to have ax plus by on one side and your constant on the other. So the first thing we're going to do in this equation under the got it is get rid of the parentheses. Now you have a couple options. This is where it's going to be your opinion what you want to do. If you want to take this -1/3 and distribute it, you can do that. Now if that -1/3 was like a 4 or a 5 or a -2, I would just distribute it, no big deal. But do you want to distribute a fraction? Personally, I would not want to do so. So I'm just going to get rid of the fraction. How do you get rid of a fraction? You multiply by its reciprocal. So if I multiply by its reciprocal, I'm going to times the right side by -3/1, or -3, and the left side by -3. Remember, that's -3/1. So I distribute the -3. You are going to get -3y plus 6 equals this right here and this right here cancel. You're left with x plus 6. Notice the y is already here. So I'm going to just move the x over to the left side, which gives me -x minus 3y plus 6 equals 6. I now want to subtract the 6 to move it over to this side. If I subtract 6, you are going to get -x minus 3y equals 0. And there is your equation in standard form. Now I'm going to show you a second way you could have done the same problem. Let's say you did this. You don't need to write this down, but you can watch. Let's say you got the same thing, but instead of moving the x to the left, you move the -3y to the right, and you did plus 3y, and you got 6 equals x plus 3y plus 6. You then subtracted the 6 and got 0 equals x plus 3y. And then you wrote it as x plus 3y equals 0. That is also acceptable. I know you're going to look at this and say, well, they're two different things. Yes, they look like two different things, but they're not. It's kind of like saying that 1/2 and -1/2 are different. They're written differently, but these are the same value. It's the same thing with these. You'll learn that later down the road. So if you check your answers in the book or with a friend and you have something completely the opposite, it most likely is still correct, and that's okay. So let's do number 7. Number 7, y equals 1/4 x minus 2. There are no parentheses to get rid of, which is fine, but you'll notice, what form is this in? This is in form slope-intercept form. So we have no parentheses to get rid of, but we sure can't have that fraction. So to get rid of a 1/4, we are going to times everything by 4. So if you times everything by 4, that's going to give you 4y equals 4 times a fourth is 1. So that'd be x minus 8. I now subtract the x. That gives me negative x plus 4y equals negative 8. And there's your answer. It's ax plus by equals c. Number 8. Y equals negative 2/3 x minus 1. I want to get rid of this divided by 3, just like over here. How do you get rid of divide by 4? You times 4. How do you get rid of divide by 3? Times everything by 3. That gives me 3y equals, these 3's cancel, negative 2x. 3 times negative 1 is minus 3. I now add 2x to the other side. 3y plus 2x equals negative 3. And there's your answer.